Alright, I'm recording here a commentary on a Supreme Commander Forged Alliance Forever community mod and ranked ladder match between two fairly high rated players on a large map. This is often a 6-player map. You can see here that there are only 2. In the southwest, the blue player, we have SpaceXMan. He's the lower rated player. He's playing UEF. Their United Earth Federation tends to have higher health units and is all around very much the baseline, I think, against which other things might compare. They have some tricks and things, but the really tricky race here is the Cybern player, the higher rated player. A lot of their units have less health and are in some ways less efficient in terms of the mass and energy cost, but they have a lot of tricks that can gain them value. For example, instead of force fields, they have stealth fields, which is a good highlight of one way in which they're different and also on average weaker unless you're exploiting their strengths. These engineer units, basically workers, from any other RTS game, are going out to expand to the mass points for both players. And on a map this large, often on any map, but especially on a map this large, the degree to which a player is smoothly able to manage an early expand while dishing out some harassment and recovering from the harassment that would come from the other player wins. So yes, you do get into epic clashes, but a lot of it's about who efficiently expands and who spends fewer pieces of, fewer clicks, less brain space, harassing the opponent to greater effect. Because you want your harassment to force them to divert more of their attention than you needed to enact it without wasting resources. Basically, time is a resource in addition to mass and energy. So, that's why we see both players here ecoing up by making a lot of undefended worker units. They don't really need military yet. Although, on a map this large, on any map, but especially on a map this large, air forces can be pretty powerful even early, especially if you don't expect them. Although generally one expects to have a scout plane out early to find any cheese, and generally figure out which direction the opponent is expanding in, which mass extractors they're upgrading. So as is typical on maps with this much reclaim and with hydro plants, the players aren't necessarily prioritizing only building the mass extractors. So you can see here there are unbuilt mass extracting points, these green spots, that engineers over here are ignoring temporarily in order to pick up the reclaim, which is short-lived one-time boost. We can see here the actual value. So these, this strip's worth a little more than 100 is left. It adds up quickly when you see that a tier 1 mass extractor is only producing 2 mass per tick. Similarly with the hydro plant spots, not every map has these, the hydrocarbon plants. But by getting those up early, you can divert resources that would normally go to constructing smaller power generators. Although this player has constructed a lot because he's going for air as his second factory instead of land, and air generally costs more power than land to build the units. Here, though, two air factories, which we saw earlier briefly from the Cybern player. So he's building a transport here. He's intending to use that to lift engineers to other islands first, most likely, and then afterwards to raid the opponent's islands. Although you never know how exactly they're going to do it until they do it. I actually got demolished on this map in a game I played a couple days ago because I just couldn't keep up with the size of it. I'm very out of practice in SupCom. I used to play back on the old ladder. But only recently rediscovered the Forged Alliance Forever community client that brought back multiplayer. Okay, so here comes the engineer drop. The scout plane stopping here probably shouldn't be, although there's so much to do in Supreme Commander that it's not shocking. Some interceptors here and a scout plane to try to cover for the transport. These interceptors are going to scout the drops, but I don't think they're going to be able to kill the transport. Maybe. Depends on the angle they get here. Well, they might here. But here, you don't want to let the enemy's interceptors or air superiority fighters or whatever air-to-air get behind your units. See there, that's when the transport died. Okay, so it did go down. I thought briefly that Red had a good take from behind. And he is building with his double air factory as opposed to a late single air factory here. Air units more quickly. So that's one big thing to say, actually, that Turinturambar versus SpaceXMan. Turinturambar got more factories online earlier. He has really stopped on power, though. Spaceman's got plenty of eco. He's ticking downwards on mass, but has plenty in the bank. I'm expecting a lot of that's going into building... Oh, okay, maybe not. He's building bombers. I thought he might be upgrading a mass extractor somewhere. It doesn't look like he is. Oh no, he has been, because this one just came online. Okay, at level 2. But look at how Turinturambar, the red player, the Cybern player, is able to come along and expand so much more quickly and naturally. So this bomber will have to do a lot of work to make up for this slower expansion, I think. SpaceXMan is already 6 mass per tick behind, although, especially in the early game, that's going to be affected by wherever engineers are reclaiming. Temporarily will be spiking the income. So this is the second island, the expansion island for Turinturambar here. He's got 2 factories online at the top. Most of the mass points covered, a tier 1 radar. Near the beach, another land factory. He's not even yet going for these mass points. That could be an APM issue, or it could just be that he's reclaiming. You see these attack moves from the engineers? Those are actually basically reclaim orders. When an engineer tries to attack move, it just reclaims units, or not units, but debris on the way. So he is prioritizing the reclaim. Here we have that bomber coming in. It's going to actually harass the commander himself. There's a drop coming in. So, okay, he did his NG drop. He's trying to build a land factory, though abandoned it looks like. He did his NG drop on the far island. Okay, so he did drop a couple here to start his home island, these closer, safer island. But he's actually getting very aggressive, trying to deny Cyber in the island that he was second to expand to. That he would have been his second to natural expand, because he went here first, to the east. But of course, in order to help his expansion to the west, where he knew he had a slower start, he did bring the commander as his first unit. That's why the bomber was able to hit him, and that's really not going to matter. If it's not enough to kill the commander, it's just a loss of mass. The bomber's loss. Because he wasn't able to take out any engineers and slow the development. And the commander's already nearly entirely recovered from that. Building mass points quickly. Is this... Yes, okay, so he prioritized the second hydrocarbon plant, and he's building a factory, although not actually adjacent to it. Often one wants a factory or other power-consuming structure adjacent to a power plant in order to get a bonus, and I'm sure we'll see that at some points on this map, right? Well, maybe these players aren't doing it. No. So, because these power plants are a little far away from the center bases. It's more common to immediately take advantage of the neighboring bonus with a power plant on a... where the power plant is closer to the base. The hydrocarbon point, that is. So some scouting, interceptors, trying to clear the way, probably for drops and transports, and because Red earlier saw the bomber out of blue, he may expect more on the way. He does look like he's transitioned kind of away from that. No, he's still building bombers, but he's not boosting them, so they're going to be coming up very slowly, and at the cost of interceptors. He's losing the air war temporarily because he's upgrading the factory that was on interceptors up to tech level 2. So in the longer term, that might help him regain the ground, but right now it's doing nothing. And I really have to say that Turinturambar is much more smoothly handled expansion to both islands. The first island, he sent plenty of engineers. He sent them reclaiming, building their mass points early with that first drop. And then the second island, he led with the commander in order to drive off any potential harass. He may be expected ground harass of some sort. But the build capacity and safety on the commander let him really get the second base up a lot faster. Blue's been staying in his own base on top of his home island and hasn't really been able to get either side online completely. He had a good stab at the right-hand side, but I guess he's taken some harassment there. Have there been battles over here? I don't think so actually yet. I think he's just slow. Yeah, he's building tanks out of here instead of engineers. These engineers are idle. Let's see, if we go to his... If we look at the orders that are queued, we might be able to see where the player's attention is as their orders change. This scout over the western island, completely uncontested for a long time now. SpaceX really suffering from the information he's giving the opponent, but there's not much he can do about it because he's lost the air game temporarily. He was ahead in terms of interceptors, not in terms of drops, because Red was still able to get off a lot of his own engineer expansion drops. But Blue's interceptor ball faltered. He is now producing tier 2 air-to-air units, the fighter bomber Janus. So that's what he's going to try to use to take this control back. But I really don't think that... I guess the mass income is pretty similar between the two players. 63 to 62. It's a lot closer than I thought it would be. Turinturambar's got a lot more energy. Part of that's... Even though he has more engineers working, he has a lot more energy because he got the power plants online earlier. SpaceX hasn't gotten either of his flank power plants online. We see them both empty here. And he hasn't even gotten his forward mass. I guess he's worried that it's open to harassment, perhaps, but... I feel like Turinturambar's got a much better handle on this game. He doesn't have much ground to air, so... excuse me. And his ground forces are pretty concentrated. He's got a tiny raiding force to guard against engineers over here. He should really spread out these scouts, though, although that's hard to do quickly, and he already has good info with his scouting planes that have been above the skies uncontested. I don't know why he doesn't just pick this somehow. Are these interceptors out of fuel? No. They slow down a lot when they get out of fuel, and then they're really weak to other... So what is this? It's ferrying units with the transport down the ledge? What? That's a little weird. So, okay, yeah, oh no, to here. So he did get a drop off of Mantis. I heard the lasers. Couldn't figure out immediately where they were from. So, the island, the more developed of the two islands for SpaceX gets hit by the drop. Probably mostly just because it was nearer to the dropping force. But he will be able to clean up pretty quickly because these Janus do air-to-air and air-to-ground, so they can take out the transports as they're in the air, or take out the ground units. But these are just assault bots. Oh no, these are assault bots, Mantis. So, without area of effect, these guys are still going to get a lot of damage off, be very efficient. And they're fast-moving, the Mantis. They're basically the fastest of the Tier 1 assault bots that isn't also a scout. So, he should be able to really tear apart chunks of this island here. Especially if he keeps dropping, although he may not be able to now that he lost his interceptor ball. Yeah, he is coming in with another drop. These two transports, so that's why this is such a sizable instant hit. The T2 transports do have a little air-to-air, they are demonstrating it there. So he's bringing a scout over now too, that's wise. Actually a bunch of scouts on this one, 2 scouts. What's going on elsewhere? Any other harass? If we hit shift, can we see where their orders are? Okay, so we got a bunch of naval yards coming up pretty close here from Turinturambar. He's going to want to use these to control the center and to control this passage to cut SpaceX off of his own natural expansion. The economy Turinturambar ahead by 11 mass per tick. And look at this reclaim going off. All these engineers, they're going to be done with that soon, so many of them. So his economy, if he's only putting this into units and not killing someone with it, may peter out slightly, but it does look like he's investing in something. Oh, and I like the air staging facilities. A lot of players forget to build this, and then their older air units run out of fuel and become useless and just die. But they make poor decisions because they feel like they have air units there, but they really don't, because they're not at full efficacy. Excuse me. Cybern early Navy is very strong, so he definitely wants to get this pressure with them early. Their frigates are one of the best ground air frigates, probably the best. Their tier 2 is devastating. So it makes sense that he wants to build them close to the enemy. He's getting probably too much. Well, it is only tier 1. He's getting tier 1 mobile anti-air units, these Sky Slammers. So, despite being the first to T2 air, SpaceX hasn't done a ton with it. His expansion drops of his engineers were slower, and his control of the expanders was not as smooth, which I sympathize with because it's part of why I lost in my match the other day. But Turinturambar really showing that he is significantly better with that 300 point rating difference. Well, not quite 300, but nearly 300 point rating difference. But a large map like this just plays so differently from a smaller map. A smaller map might, be 1/4 the size of this. Like one of these islands, conceivably, could be one of the smaller maps. A single island with the water around it. It'd be kind of imbalanced and maybe a little smaller than some things, but it wouldn't actually be that much smaller than some maps. So these drops continuing to harass. So he's blown out the more developed of SpaceX's 2 side bases. And then he dropped, of course, on the other one. There's a ton of barely defended, undefended engineers down here that he doesn't see because he hasn't spread out his scouts. This drop is going to get cleaned up now. These tanks, these Strikers, Tech 1 tanks from the UEF, are generally more efficient than the Mantis, pound for pound, if they're in a direct fight. I think it's unfortunate. There's a ton of APM necessary to run this whole huge map. But if he'd spread out his scouts a bit, sent one down here, one this way, he would have seen the force coming and been able to avoid it. And he may have even seen the engineer pack and been able to wipe them out. And that would have been pretty brutal. Although given that he's blown up so much of SpaceXMan's economy, the engineers aren't doing as much when they don't have space to reclaim from because... well, I say that, but his economy is actually fairly balanced. Too much energy. But... which is not bad because energy just isn't so much wasted when it overflows. Like mass. Generally mass is the limiting factor. It's not really fair, it's a balance. So, a bold attempt by these Janices from SpaceXman to go directly for the home base of Turinturambar and try to engage the enemy air force there to keep them down. But these T1 interceptors are flying out pretty quickly. I guess the AoE from the Janus is blowing up these engineers very effectively. This is actually pretty damaging. Destroying 8 structures, although to be fair, a number of them were just staging facilities, not very strong. But there's one ground to air that was probably hastily put up with the engineers. He doesn't actually manage to take out the T2 air factory headquarters, which is a real shame. Because if you take out a headquarters, the opponent needs to build another headquarters somewhere if they don't already have one in order to keep producing T2 units out of all of their T2 factories. Basically, there's 2 types of factory, a headquarters and just a regular factory. So his T2 factories would have only been able to make T1 units. Although, I say that, but he only has the one T2 factory. He really needed to take it out if he could have. More health by a lot, right? Oh, no. 7,800 versus... is that 85? Oh no, 35. Okay, yeah, a lot more health. I think he believed that he was... I believe SpaceX thought he was going to wipe out the enemy interceptors because he had Tier 2 air-to-air. Little banter between the players. So let's go back to the observer mode, see what both sides are seeing. This is really devastating, this denial of this southeast island by Turinturambar. These interceptors really shouldn't be leaving the base, though. I guess he knows, and he probably sees on radar, let's see. He knows that the opponent is still making these Tier 2 air-to-air that double as air-to-ground and will wipe out his expansion, which is what he needs to do here. SpaceX needs to clear up these interceptors and then destroy the northwest island from Turinturambar before a critical mass of frigates and cruisers makes this too difficult. Already the first cruiser out is going to do a number on this and actually probably shut down most of this idea. He will blow up some clusters of Mantis, probably, and some mass... Ooh, Tier 2 mass extractor. That's what he's prioritizing. That's wise to focus on. So he gets some value here. He rushing up PD, or not PD, but anti-air with his engineers. Those get wiped out, and because the anti-air were grouped, the Janus are able to take the 2 out for the price of 1. That's nice for them. The second cruiser out though for Turinturambar, and these cruisers are really, we're going to spell the end of the air game. The Cybern frigates too, but they weren't in the right spot to stop this cross, and Janus is just so fast they could probably fly across because they're tier 2. Alright, so the frigates are going to pressure the small and budding navy of SpaceX, Turinturambar's Cybern frigates, focusing down the tier 2 Valiant class destroyer. Yeah, this is really good for him. Coming in here, cruiser out, will lay some good damage down on these frigates. They don't have any anti-missile protection. Yeah, he's kind of not grouped up enough to... well, he does have the 3 cruisers in back. Okay. So I predict SpaceX is going to lose the whole navy here. Turinturambar's economy is way ahead now, 111 to 60. SpaceX hasn't been able to advance its economy for a long time. We're at the 21-minute mark, and he's on basically 1.5 islands, whereas Turinturambar's on a full 3, and it's been upgrading tier 2 on some of them, tier 2 mass extractors and factories. SpaceX saying he's not that good yet. Yeah, it's hard to manage such a large map. It really, really is, because there are so many different a couple pieces. First of all, your attention needs to go to spreading out your engineers to handle all the various tasks. That means through drops, that means through walking on the ground, that means through setting up reclaim. When you have lots of factories on lots of different parts of the map, each producing engineers, you know, they produce them as quickly as you can give them orders, basically. So between that and the fact that there are so many points to where you can be harassed, or harass the opponent if you're ahead on APM or willing to sacrifice some APM. But really, Cybern, who has the tools for offensive poking and harassment, really excels at this part of the game. Although really, I don't know that it was so much the race here. Oh, SpaceX Control Ks himself, okay. So he concedes. He sees the writing on the wall. Turinturambar with the smoother expansion and early eco up, and then the earlier harassment. I think one of the most notable points, besides the fact that SpaceX only got 2 islands essentially, was that Turinturambar hard expanded with engineers, drops, and walking to his second island, and then expanded with his commander, followed by engineers to the second. So his commander was able to get a head start on the second island, and he didn't have one lagging behind too much. Whereas the scouting from Turinturambar revealed that SpaceX definitely did. Remember, Turinturambar had a long time with uncontested tier 1 scouts flying above everything on the map. He had perfect information, which is really powerful. So he knew that he could drop on the more developed island from the opponent here with his first wave of harassment drops as opposed to eco drops, and it was devastating because that's where he'd been investing, but he hadn't protected it. He had no wall off, not that it would have helped against a drop. You know, anti-air, not that that's so good against drops either. He needed either a cloud of interceptors and some radar, or a bunch of point defense on the ground maybe. He needed intel. He needed to know that drops were coming and where they were coming. Because the Cybern made 2 air factories very early, he was able to dominate the early air game with those scouts and interceptors. And then a little after that, I recall, SpaceX got a large enough cloud of interceptors of his own out to contest and actually really dominate the skies, and he needed to use that moment to pull off some harassment and not just curl up. He needed to simultaneously expand his eco and throw a punch, so that instead of his eco being as vulnerable, Turinturambar would have to turn around and deal with the punch. It's really hard on a map this big, though. Okay, good game, folks.